Well, I hope you're ready for an outstanding class. And if you are, there's the door. Outstanding class, there's the door. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13 says this. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. So this week I received a phone call from a good friend in Boise, Idaho, who said that his mother-in-law has been diagnosed with cancer in the last few months, and it has metastasized and traveled rapidly, and they're not giving her long. She's been in contact with hospice, and he said, would you consider coming up and just being part of the celebration of life? And I said, well, let me think and pray about that. Yes. Una is one of those women who, remember when the Lord said, anyone who leaves mother and father and brother and sister does not lose, you gain, what was it, 100 times more? Anybody have that verse memorized? I had it in my mind where it is, but it's gone now. So if somebody can either search it out and help me find it. But it's, I think it's in Matthew somewhere. I think I know. I can see it on the page, but I can't remember the chapter and verse, and I didn't write it down. Lord, we have left everything for you, Peter said. No one leaves mother, father, brother, sister without receiving 100 times more in this life and the life to come. Quick, Bible scholars. Find that for me, would you? So that's the passage of Scripture combined with this that set my mind for what we might talk about today. I want to leave it completely open. Good morning. I won't draw attention to y'all coming in just a couple minutes late because we started late anyway. So when I received that call, my mind flashed back to 12 years of memory. And Jesus said, nobody leaves mother, father, brother, sister without receiving 100 times more in this life and the life to come. And I've been thinking about living so many places in the country. I grew up in West Virginia, went to school in New Mexico, Cincinnati, Ohio, Port Huron, Michigan, Columbia, Missouri, Logan, Utah, Springfield, Missouri, Boise, Idaho, Arkansas. Now here we are. Kind of like the elephant that fell out of the airplane. Some of you heard that, right? He said, that's me all over. You heard about that, hadn't you? It's all over town. So there I was, all over, and I have experienced the promise of Jesus. You don't leave mother, father without, I want to use this word, inheriting 100 times more. Where is it?
Mark 10.
It's not in Matthew. Mark 10.
Verse 30.
It is in Matthew.
Matthew 19:29.
Matthew 19:29 and Mark 10:30. All right, and it says what I said it said, or does it say more?
And whoever left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life.
It said more. Jesus said more than what I quoted him saying. Good. Except for the 100 times more. Now we have microphones around if you want to make a comment or raise a question, give an illustration, example. Raise your hand and we'll get the mic to you so that people online, greetings folks online, can hear what you have to say, contribute to this morning's discussion. Okay. This passage in Revelation has been pertinent to me this last week. And I've spoken with my mom in Boise. There are two or three ladies there who took the place of, not really the place of, but they became my spiritual mom. And there was ever anything happening. It was like I was feeling poorly. I might get a pan of soup out of the blue just because I was feeling poorly. I mean, they watched for me. They took care of me. They always were interested. And they, you know what I'm talking about? You've traveled, and there's certain people in your world that God has placed like a mom or like a dad. So I've been thinking, what will I say at this celebration of life? What will I contribute that will be meaningful? First of all, it's an honor when somebody asked, and she was the one who said, can you ask Kevin to come up and her words, and do my funeral? Can I tell you up front, I hate funerals. I don't know how you feel about them, but I hate them. I hate what we do with them. I hate, especially, if I encourage anyone up front about a funeral, my encouragement is if you have the coffin, the body in the coffin, so more and more are going toward cremation. We did. That's what Jan wanted. So it was a big picture on the screen of the living, not a body of the dead. We didn't celebrate the dead. We celebrated her life. And so if you have a casket and you have the top up at the beginning, close it and leave it closed. And I think it's a terrible thing to close and then open it again, or leave it open the whole time and then people walk by. Say, but they want to say goodbye. I get it. Say goodbye before. Because anything good that's taken place during that time, I think, is undone when we leave the casket open. You didn't ask for that, but I thought I'd give it to you anyway. Just advice. Sir.
Hello. Well, I'm glad we brought up the Clark family because our family had a habit of photographing people who were still alive next to the casket and things like that. So in our family...
And that's a family tradition?
Oh, no, I'm not saying it was enjoyable. So
No. It's a family tradition, though.
It is. It almost makes you feel like at some point somebody was at a wake, maybe 200 years ago or something like that. But it just comes to mind because our family just took those photos, and so I have seen those photos, and I would agree with, especially those that are saved. I think the hardest part in a funeral for those that may not be, I'll just say it like that, that's the most difficult one.
That's a good point. So do what you need to do to grieve. Take back what I said. If that helps grieve, then do that. But I think in the funeral itself, the people who are there, the saying of goodbye and closure is some of the healing that can take place is undone by the walking by. I've watched that happen and just think there's maybe a different way to do that. When you shut the coffin lid, leave it shut. Like I said, you didn't ask me for that advice, but I thought I'd throw it out at the beginning of class anyway and start a controversy. Yeah.
But I think it's so different for Christians than it is for non-Christians.
No, what do you mean by that?
But what I mean by that is it's a celebration for Christians, isn't it?
Yes.
My wife and I argue about who gets to go first. I'm serious because we don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
But for people who aren't Christians, this is goodbye, and there may have to be closure somehow.
Yes.
I don't know what that means.
This is a temporary goodbye. Yeah. This is not the final. This isn't the final word. This is the entrance to a new life, a new facet of life. What do you want to say? Where I wanted to go with this is this. I just begin the class with this challenging question because Ray said, would you teach a combined class? And I said, sure. I thought, well, what would be beneficial for everyone? Then this week, this is happening in my life. And I thought, well, maybe we would all benefit from this kind of a discussion. So I want to throw this out and see where it goes. And if it doesn't, I've got something else prepared. Or if you think you'd like to ask, if you'd like to ask a different question or take us a different direction, this is a class that we have together, not something I'm going to come in and give to you, okay? I want a lot of participation if we can have it, and that it would be encouraging. And here's what I want to ask you. What would you like to be said at your funeral? Back up, take out the word funeral, in place, celebration of life. Jan wrote out pretty much what she wanted said about her, and she said, now, Kev, you can say whatever else you want, but I want there to be a time when you say this. And she wrote some things that she'd like to be said at her funeral. I've attended a workshop where we had to write our own obituary. Imagine you're 85, you're 95, and you're dead, and you've lived a long life. Project forward, because we were a lot younger then, project forward, what would you like people to say about you? And what the question was involved was, what kind of life do you want to live so that people will say this? Because we were young, and we were looking forward to when we were older, and what would you like them to say about you when you're gone? Okay, I want, first of all, people to say he is a Jesus man. I don't think there's any better compliment you give to anybody than he's a Jesus man. She's a Jesus woman. Life was centered on Christ. If I have a headstone, I want it there. I want it here, so it's lived out there, so people say that. Now, it's first and foremost in my mind. What would you like said? I'm reminded of a cemetery memorial stone. Had a bowling ball on top of it. It said lifetime average 287. That's pretty good. I don't know, I want that on my tombstone. That's pretty good, right? So you can imagine the family sitting around saying, what do we want to put on Dad's tombstone? And one of the kids says, I don't know, what was most important to him? And somebody said, well, he loved bowling. That your life is focused on something so much that that's what they would write on your tombstone. What would you like said on your tombstone? What would you like said at your celebration of life? Because ours is not just a departure and we want people comforted, but we also are leaving a legacy, a story from the hold on to. What's the primary message of your story? We got you thinking? You don't have to answer this out loud, but I do want to challenge you to write a few things down about yourself that you once said. So I suggested that Una write out, and I was talking to her son-in-law, who's one of my best friends there, encourage her to do this. I failed to ask her on the phone last time we talked, but encourage her to write down what would she like said about her at the celebration of life. And he said, oh, she's already done that. I said, okay, not surprised. Not surprised. And I wish you could know. Wish you had a chance to know her. So what would you like said? Anybody want to say anything about this so far? Is this a practical kind of question to begin a class with? Yes.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize.
I think that if we have lived long enough and we've been raised at least 51% good instead of the 49% bad, that talking about yourself is something we're trained not to do. And
true.
And but I'm not saying that it's not worth it. My wife has probably, I don't know how many journals over the years, so she writes. I am petrified to think of what might be in them. For the last 20, almost 5 years that we've been married, I say that in jest, but at the same time, my focus is to be a parent, grandparent, and show them the Lord by the way that I live, and that would be, verbally, that would be the basis or bullet point, you know. But then again, if they're spending too much talking about me, maybe they're not thinking enough about Christ. So,
okay.
I mean, I can write, believe it or not, but I don't know that I'd be pretty hard on myself in my obituary, I think.
Well, yeah. And it is, we are often more critical of ourselves, and we're trained not to, let the lips of others praise you, not your own. That was a Bible verse on Versal, by the way. There's a Bible app you can play a game with people who can find this verse fastest. Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be an interesting exercise in self-honesty, because there's always, not only when you're evaluating somebody else, but even I think more so when you're evaluating yourself, it's easy to either be falsely humble or even in some circumstances to be arrogant. And actually shooting the middle course there and honestly admitting to yourself where you can be good, as opposed to, or where you're doing well, as opposed to where you're not doing so well. I think that, an exercise like that would probably be, a really useful thing towards that end.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tried, Kevin.
You did well. There was a man in a small town, and he went to various preachers in the town. He said, "Would you do my brother's funeral, and will you say some positive things?" He said, "That skunk, that scoundrel." Every one of the ministers said, "Are you kidding me? You want me to say something positive about your brother? There's no way I would ever do that." He said, "I'll give you $10,000 if you'll say he was a good man. He lived a good life, and he was a wonderful person." He said, "I wouldn't do it for $10,000. Finally, the guy said, "I'll do it for $10,000. And so it came time for the funeral, and he got up and he said, "He was a scoundrel. He was a skunk. He cheated people. He womanized. He was drunk all the time. He's on drugs. He stole. And he was a vicious man. He was as unholy to the core as you could possibly be. He should have spent 25 more years in prison than he did. And he should have possibly even been put to death. He was a terrible, terrible man." And everybody in the room was shaking their heads, but said, "But compared to his brother, that man was a decent, loving, caring." Yes.
So there's a preacher still in Choctaw, Oklahoma, named Mike Mazzalongo. He preached in San Diego when Don and I were there. And one of his sermons is about preaching or residing over a funeral of very much this guy.
Right.
But
right.
the way that Mike did it, because it was difficult, he said that however God sees fit to judge, we will be judged in his perfection. It will be a perfect judgment.
Absolutely.
And that's predominantly how he did that.
And then it's not a time where we focus on the person as much as it is a time where we can lift up Jesus. And so we're not, my grandfather used to say, you'll never be able to preach anybody into heaven. They've already preached their own funeral. They've already preached their own funeral, he would say, in their funeral. They have been preaching their funeral, their life. And so I can't say his person is in or not, because that's judgment that's not given to people. That's only given to God. And let me tell you a passage of Scripture we're going to look at in just a moment, in Acts chapter 17, if you want to be turning there. Yeah.
Well, I think for me it's difficult because, it's hard to do that self-examination. And what I would find interesting is, what would others say about me when I'm gone?
Yeah.
Because I'd really like to know, do they think I'm like this? Do they think I'm like that? If they think I'm this way, well, then maybe I need to change the way I'm, living to change that, because maybe it's not a good influence. And that's why I think it's really hard for us when we have to think, well, what would we want people to say at our funeral? I think I'd be much more interested in finding out what others might have to say.
So are you opening yourself up to that? Would you like us all to write what we would say about you and your...
Sure.
No, that may not be a bad exercise to actually take place. Take 2 or 3 people who know you well and say, when I'm dead, what will you say about me? And be honest with me, because that's a mirror that you may want to reflect in and say, okay, there's some things in my life right now that I need to change. Yeah. Got another hand over here. You guys, this side of the room is really participating well. You all need to pick it up. All right.
Back about 10 years ago when Tani's and my mom passed, I went out for the funeral. You know, we were doing all the other things. And then when they actually did the ceremony there in the church building, I can remember being, I don't know that offended was the right word, more annoyed. But the minister of the congregation out there that my mom attended, she'd already, her body had already been cremated, so there was nothing there but, like the picture like you were talking about earlier. But we went in there and we spent, I think, 5 minutes talking about my mom, and then he preached about a half an hour, maybe 45-minute sermon on top of that had absolutely nothing to do with her. And while I, perfectly happy to listen to, a sermon at any other time, I was like, come on, can't we have just, half an hour for my mom here? I know that she was okay with it. She was as Christian a woman as you'll ever find in this world. But it just was kind of annoying that, we were all gathered there to talk about her, and it just, the discussion about her was minimal at best.
Right. Thanks for pointing that out, because the time is, we do focus on the person, but the person we're focusing on at that point would be saying, no, talk about the one that's most important. So I hear that battle, and I think, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, no. And especially when it's somebody who is so centered on the Lord, that you would focus on how she was and how she expressed and demonstrated that. I'll get real personal with you in a couple minutes, but you still have your hand up to say something? Okay. You're just comfortable. Okay. Oh, here we go. On this side. Ready to go. Yes. Yeah.
I heard that a woman put on there, she was a faithful Christian, and she's just had on the tombstone, "I'm ready."
I'm ready.
I'm ready. And I thought that was really good.
That is good. That is good. Yeah. And we have a song in the book. I don't think we've sung it since I've moved here. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? That was the pull them down the aisle kind of song. Like Just As I Am. We're going to sing it 5 more times. Let's go. Can we get somebody up front?
Well, I've got songwriting at the end of the month. I'll make a point.
Make it a point to do that? Okay. Other comments or examples, illustrations? Yes, Aaron. Be patient. He's coming. Okay. It's on.
I think one of the things that strikes me most at funerals is when people will start telling stories about the person who's died, and you begin to discover all of the small ways in which they have affected people's lives for the better, and all of the ways that they've shown the love of Christ that nobody was really aware, but when you get 50 people in a room finally talking about it, you discover the tremendous impact that this person had in their life and how their life was pointing to Christ. So you can have a celebration, a funeral, however you'd like to say it, that's about a human person, but that is pointing to Christ, which is, spoiler alert, Hebrews.
It's Hebrews. Are we moving there this morning, are we?
That you be imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises, right? And the promise is Christ. So those two things aren't mutually exclusive, and I think it's often a good measure of what that person did with their life, the extent that they demonstrated Christ, but they kind of got themselves out of the way. It wasn't about them necessarily.
Excellent point. Wade.
This reminded me of my father's funeral. And something that really struck me is, and I've been to several funerals, and there's always that sadness and everything, but the comments we got afterwards was that it was a very uplifting experience because of the way my father was. And it kind of blew me away that people were saying, I've never been to a service like this. I've never been to a celebration of life that was uplifting for everybody. And to me, that's just amazing. And I think I'd like to have that at my funeral, where it's an uplifting experience. Yeah, there's the sadness because I'm going to be gone, but I'm going to be in a much better place. And then just to be able to have that for those that are there, to be uplifted, to say, yeah, he did make an impact.
Absolutely. That's good. And at times like this, when we talk about things like this, it helps focus on what is the core of your life. Yes?
Have any of you ever seen, I know Kim and Jean have because they brought it to us, the video of the Dash?
I have.
I think that probably impacted me more, or brought to my memory or to my mind that you have a beginning and you have an end, but what matters is what is in between. The dash.
The dash of life.
The dash of life. And I just happened to think of that, and I would love to see it again and it be shown to the church, because it really hit me of that dash is what you are.
Okay. Yes, that's your life. Maybe we have somebody at the NIT upstairs who could find that dash of life and project that for us if he can discover where it is. You got that already? You want to watch it right now? Yeah, well, if you have it. No, is it too long? Okay. If I haven't seen specific that then if it's too long, because I know there's a kind of a poem about the dash of life, and that's what I thought you were referring to, not an entire video about the dash. Yes.
So you saying that this side is not talking. It's like my brain's going 100 miles an hour, and I don't always.
No, I can't imagine that happen, Tracy.
And I don't always know how to properly organize my thoughts into words. So I have notes here, and so hopefully this can portray a little bit of what I was thinking in relation to that. So I know when first becoming a Christian and coming to the church. And this isn't probably just me. I think as America, we're a little bit individualistic. And so we tend to be individualistic and goal-oriented. And that can affect our view of the church. And I think of that when I first came, to the church. And we tend to see the church as an organization that ought to have clearly defined goals and programs that are in line with my goals and what I want. And so I hope that in growing and at the end that has changed, and that my goal is that we have a different view of the church, and I have changed my perspective of the church, and I hope that I can help others understand a different view of the church, and that we're not just a collection of individuals who happen to meet at the same spot every week for worship and instruction, that we've become a family of God. And that implies relationships. And so my goal is that we're a network of caring relationships where we're nurtured to maturity. And through that, we reflect, the person of Jesus Christ just in our midst. And so that the church is the relationships and the family, I guess. And so that's my goal.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Is your hand up, Dave? Is that why you're... Okay. You have it like this. I'm like an auctioneer. You move, I'm going to call on you.
I'm going to give you this because I can't read it. Oh, God. This is smart. This is about this. This is what I would get.
Oh. So you see this and you see this. Mm-hmm. You want me to read it that way? Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you draw this? This is beautiful. You need to come up and ask to be able to look at this picture, and I'm going to hold it up here so that people at home can zero in on it. But it's a cross in the middle with race cars and a sword in the Bible, which is the Word of God, and a crown. And it says, it's the finish of 2 Timothy chapter 4. The passages underlined are now key thoughts in this picture that has been drawn. Beautiful. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I have fought the good fight. I have a crown of righteousness. For BJ, 1949 to 2004, I will always and forever love my sister by heart. Second Timothy 4, 7 through 8. Thank you. And this is how I would want people to say about me or any of my family. Betty Jo Ham lived this example. I will cry. Well done, my good and faithful servant. Matthew 25:23. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. I have fought the good fight. I have a crown of life, a crown of righteousness. Betty Jo lived this life, and if I can do this well, I will have accomplished what I need. Thank you for sharing that. If you'll let me have this letter, I'm going to take a picture of it. Where do we go with this? How do we wrap up a class? We're getting close to the end. We have up here, up front, somebody with a mic. We have a mic for Gene and a mic for Mike. And looks like Mike got his mic first, and Gene gets his mic second. Go, Mike.
Having done a couple of funerals
Yes.
for Christians and non-Christians, it's so much easier to present the message with the example that you have in front of you to the audience with a Christian.
Yes.
The individuals were good, upstanding, moral people, but Dale had failed to ever be obedient where Dorothea, his wife, had been obedient for her entire life. And it's so much easier to get the message out for Howard and Dorothy, which were Christians. And it's so much easier to relate because we had the example of their life as opposed to Dale. I had to really dig for some of the examples I had with Dale. So.
Okay. You are right. Having done both funerals, Christians and non-Christians, I much rather focus because the focus of the life is different and the end result is different. So much easier to lift that up. Lift up Jesus. Yes.
The dash.
The dash. You found it.
I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from beginning to the end. He noted that the first date, the date of birth, and he spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth. And now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the home, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what is true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's action to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash?
Yeah. Thank you. That was worth hearing. Go and reflect on our own departure. Think about the people that you presently are connected to and love. Because you don't know when the last time is going to be when you have the opportunity to speak to that person or be with him or her in your life. And so my encouragement is this: focus on the positive, be thankful, express appreciation, compliment, give words of encouragement, laugh together often, cherish the time you have together, and cherish each other. Married 36 years in a month when Jan died. Well, we did not have a perfect marriage because she was married to me. Broken people marry broken people, and we live broken lives often. And there were times that it was rough just to stay together. Our worst times are better than no times at all. Hold on to that. Somebody here needs to hear that, I believe. I truly do. And what you set out at the beginning, especially in a marriage, what you set out at the beginning in a friendship, to be for each other, to always be there with each other. Cherish the times you have together because you're cherishing each other. And there's always time to change that until there isn't. Until there isn't.
Just something came to mind, believe it or not, because I still have a portion of one. So the term is life gives you lemons, make lemonade.
Make lemonade, yeah.
Something when you're talking about broken people, to my wife and I are the same. I would state that through Christ, for as many broken pieces as we may have as individuals, it is through Christ that he is capable of putting together a mosaic of the two.
Thank you. I stole this from someone and have started using it occasionally in a celebration of life. Did with Jan, did with her uncle Paul, who's like a dad to me, and Craig, his son, who's like a brother to me, had to ask would I come and, lack of a better term, MC that celebration of life. Paul Eckstein lived a life dedicated to help people know Jesus. Man baptized hundreds and hundreds of people through his life. And he had an incredible knack to be able to turn conversations to the Lord. And so multiple people got up and told stories about Paul. And one man said, Paul could take any conversation and bring in something about Jesus, and within 20, 30 minutes have that person ready to become a Christian. And I watched that happen. I was privileged to know him. He said, I could just see Paul on a plane, somebody sitting next to him, and say, boy, this weather sure is bad, isn't it? Yeah, sure is. I haven't seen this much rain in a long time. No, probably the world hadn't seen this much rain except for times of Noah. Well, 8 in all were saved through water, and baptism now saves you through the resurrection. And that he would turn every conversation to the Lord and bring somebody to Jesus into a living, dynamic relationship. I think this was the first celebration of life that I did this, but I did this also with Jan's celebration of life. You know, when you finish the race, When somebody's at the finish line, they're coming across the finish line, how do the crowds respond? Exactly. They're standing. Ovation, yes, way to go, you did it. I said, if anybody deserves a standing ovation at this time for finishing the race, Paul Eckstein. Then later I said, Jan does. Incredible. Immediately everybody stood up, and for almost 5 minutes there was applause. First time I heard that was Jerry Jones. I don't know if you know Jerry Jones. He used to teach at Harding. Jerry Jones talked about when his wife had died, and he was standing at the graveside, and they were at the lower of the casket, and he said that. He says, Claudette has finished the race. It's only appropriate that we would celebrate. And he began to applaud, and people standing around applaud. And they started shouting and cheering. And he said, I could just imagine, I saw some workers just about 5, 6 rows away stop their work and look at us. And I could just imagine them thinking, boy, I bet they're glad she's gone. And he said, and in a way, we were. Far better. Blessed are those who die in the Lord. I hope it's been an encouraging time. It's been good for me to hear from you. And if you want to talk about this more, why not? Make this a conversation with somebody. Hey, you know what we talked about in class today? Watch how the Lord will open that door to talk about Him to anybody as you talk about what we discussed in class today. All right, we're done.